It has only been a couple weeks since we made a video about Volkswagens, but in this video, we're not here to talk to you about Volkswagen's history. We want to talk about a scandal that the company Volkswagen performed, and it almost made them go bankrupt. Volkswagen, with all the companies under it, they are the second most sold vehicles on earth. Not only is this car company well known in the US and Europe, but they love it all over the world. When a company wants to import their vehicle into the United States, they have to follow a special set of laws in terms of safety and emissions. Volkswagen passed these tests with flying numbers, even their diesel models. Because if you didn't know, if you want to sell a sedan that's diesel in America, it's extremely hard. We're in 2015. All the diesel Volkswagens are driving around the world, and it seems like there's nothing wrong with them. The company would do some wild commercials as well. Like for example, they would say, even though this is a diesel model, they sometimes run cleaner than gasoline models. Do you see this? It says clean diesel on the side, but unfortunately, after 2015, that clean diesel turned into a dirty lie. Volkswagen would claim that on their diesel models, called the TDIs, they have a NOx system in their exhaust that separate the nitrogen and oxygen from the pollution and doesn't let that enter the atmosphere. The instructions that was given by the EPA and the car manufacturers in the US have to follow says the amount of NOx a certain diesel vehicle could produce. NOx basically comes from nitrogen and oxygen, and the amount of NOx in your exhaust is basically the smog or pollution. The list of the EPA that was given to manufacturers says for each mile a car is driven, it should produce less than 0.07 grams of NOx. It's also good to know that the EPA themselves have to test the cars to make sure they run correctly before they give the stamp of approval. When they tested the TDI models of Volkswagen, they realized that this thing is very clean because it's only producing 0.04 grams of NOx per mile, and that's almost half of the legal limit. There were a lot of diesel models by Volkswagen that were being sold all over the world, and the company was happy about it. And then we get to the year 2014, when 3 students from the University of West Virginia are testing a Volkswagen diesel. And when they were testing it, they were suspicious of the emissions that were coming out of the exhaust while they drove it. They were working on a Volkswagen Passat and a Jetta, and their test showed that the TDI Jetta was producing 35 times the legal limit of emissions, but the Passat was running a little bit better, and it was 20 times the legal limit. At first they think that the cars are running bad and it's the car's fault. This is the chart they came up with. That green line you see down there is the legal limit, and as you can see, these two are much higher. The vehicle C you're seeing in the end is a BMW X5 diesel model, and the students were also testing that vehicle, but the line that's way higher was on the uphill test, and in EPA terms, that's allowed as long as it's an uphill, but the Volkswagens failed all of them miserably. These students get all this information and gather it up, but they don't know what to do with it because Volkswagen is a ginormous country all over the world, and they don't want to go public with it and get sued by their prestigious lawyers for defamation. The students come up with a better idea, and they say they're not going to go public with it. They're just going to hand all the tests they did to the EPA. When EPA looks at the papers, they immediately start running Volkswagen TDI models, and right away they see the results that it's running extremely dirty. After these tests, the EPA complains to Volkswagen and asks them why their cars are running 40 times dirtier than the legal limit. You probably noticed, but in most US states, almost every year, or in some other states, once every 2 years, you need to get your car inspected or smog, and that means connecting to a computer to see if all the monitors clear. Obviously, the Volkswagen TDI models needed the inspection, and they would pass with flying colors every time. So how was that possible? This is when Volkswagen's trick gets exposed. The engineers in Volkswagen programmed their computers of their vehicles so perfectly that when you hook it up to the inspection center, it basically tricked the smog machine and everything was perfect. EPA realized that the computer was messed with and it's doing that, and they would complain again and tell them why are their cars with no issues whatsoever, but after the inspection they're running extremely dirty, but when they're being inspected they give off extremely low pollution. At the end of 2014, EPA goes public with this information and tells the news networks everywhere that Volkswagen TDI models are running more dirty than you ever knew. VW's executives realize that they're in a very bad spot and they're looking for a solution before they explode. They basically tell all their dealers to call a recall for all Volkswagen TDI models, and that means the owners have to bring the call in so they can work on it and fix the problem. I don't know what the executive of Volkswagen were thinking, because they looked for more tricks. Instead of accepting that it's running dirty and actually fix the issue, with their new recall, they basically programmed the computer to work better and smarter so they can trick the inspection centers. But the thing that Volkswagen didn't know, EPA was extremely suspicious of them and they were looking close. After the recall was done and they quote-unquote fixed the problem, EPA requested some TDI models to be sent to them. They realized that when they test the Volkswagen TDI, they run good for 23 minutes, but after that, they start running dirty once again. They basically programmed the computer to run clean for 23 minutes, which is basically the amount of time the inspection needs, then it could run however it feels like. All this is happening and almost 1 year passes by, but eventually on September 24th, 2015, Volkswagen finally comes clean, and they finally said that yes, they purposefully programmed the computer for it to do that. The longer they took with this problem, the worse it got, and after this they realized that Volkswagen has been doing this with their TDI models since 2007, almost 8 years. A lot of experts believe the reason that Volkswagen did this was to compete with their main competitor, Toyota. As you know, Toyota is the biggest seller of cars around the world, and they're number 1 in the US as well. Volkswagen was number 2 in the world, but they were extremely far behind from Toyota in the US, and they wanted to catch up. But it seems like the executives of Volkswagen didn't really want to pay for research and development, and they took the quote-unquote easier route. And whenever you cheat like this, you will eventually get caught. You might not believe this, but in this short period of time all over the world, 11 million Volkswagen TDI models were sold. This scandal was so extreme that Volkswagen could not run away from it, and that's why they were forced to recall all 11 million models. But this time, they couldn't just slap a new update on the computer or program some numbers and send it on their way. This time, they actually had to replace some components in the exhaust system that cost a pretty penny. They were losing a lot of money. Not only did their sales go down, there were a lot of new costs coming their way. We should not forget that on the other side, there were a lot of fines and people that sued Volkswagen, and they all add to the cost. At that time, they basically paid $30 billion in lawsuits and fines. The exhaust systems that were added onto these TDI models were much cheaper than these fines and lawsuits. There were an earthquake in the Volkswagen office because a lot of executives resigned, especially the CEO, Martin Winterkorn. A lot of people predicted that the Volkswagen stocks will fall drastically, but it only went down by 5%. After this scandal, Volkswagen really focused on their ID models, meaning the electric cars, and when they showed their all-new electric cars, they basically went back to where they were before. We could say the electric cars really helped their company's reputation to get back. These 3 students basically exposed the trick. A lot of people got their money back for their car. Volkswagen TDI models run a lot cleaner now, but these guys didn't really get an award for what they did. What do you guys think?